Let me say, first of all, that it's a privilege that I can get a chance to have a conversation with you after, I don't know, how many years has it been?
It's been about 10 years not seeing you, maybe more.
More, since early 2005.
So this is about 15, 16 years of not seeing you.
That is crazy.
But let me say how much of a privilege it is for me as well. Having worked with somebody like you, incredible mind, straight to the point, unrepentantly professional. And we don't always count our blessings, but I mean, it's incredible having worked with you, and it's always a pleasure to go back into the deep recesses of our mind to see exactly what went right and what didn't go so right back then. So it's maybe more of a privilege for me to be speaking to the editor, Phillip Nyakpo.
I feel exactly the same about you. In fact, I've always thought about you, and I always knew you were going to be something. I spoke to Yao Crunchy yesterday, and he said he was always in awe of your ability as a commentator on sports, that it always intimidates him, and I thought, yeah, that's how we all felt.
I mean, he genuinely says some generous things about people. He's a man with a good heart. It's very difficult to find people like that, in every sphere of life. Somebody who truly encompasses friendship, leadership, boss, all in one. And it's always great to have someone like that in your life. And Yao was my boss. He will always remain my boss.
And in spite of working with you for years, the one thing, or should I say one of the many things I never knew, was how you got associated with Skyy in the first place. How did your relationship with Skyy start in the first place?
Wow, that's going back some 23, 24 years, I think, or 25 actually. Sometime in 1997, if my memory serves me right, I was a national service personnel, fresh out of secondary school, just finished my A-levels. Mm-hmm. And then I got posted to a place called Daboase. Naturally, coming from Takoradi and being a bit loud, we kind of invaded Daboase, which was a rather small place, bigger than a village, smaller than a town. So we're kind of the kings of the block. Mm-hmm. And in those days, there was something they used to call the National Service Week. I don't know if they still have it. Mm-hmm. So this National Service Week was the time that service personnel bonded, came together. It was almost towards the end of service, and people held programs to commemorate the year-long national service activity. So as fate would have it, I was one of the people who put the Daboase Service Week together. There were 4 of us friends, and the reason we did that back then was really not to commemorate national service. We figured back then that there were too many girls who were serving in Daboase, but not in the big town, but in villages. So we needed to devise a way to bring all the girls to the town. And that's why we took over the National Service Week. So we could almost have an unofficial census of the girls in the area. So the high point of the National Service Week was what we called the Miss Daboase National Service. So we held this beauty pageant and a variety night, and we didn't have an MC. So I opted to MC it, and we brought in some judges. And one of the judges at the event, coincidentally, was Kofi Jetsua Ankoma,
KGA,
who had just been voted into Skyy Power FM. Because Skyy was new then. I think they hadn't even started. They were just about beginning. They were just about beginning their on-service trial. So here we were. Kofi Nkwama was one of the judges, and after the event, he asked me, "Have you ever done radio?" I'm like, "What's that?" Because at the time, the only radio in Takoradi was Twin City Radio.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Well, some friends of mine are coming to open up a radio station in Takoradi, and it's going to be called Skyy Power FM. And if you want, I can recommend you to the owner and to see if you could work there." I was thrilled. I was blown over. I was ecstatic. And I said, "Come on, bring it on." So he said I should go see the owner. It turns out that, we went through so many, loops. No, actually, wait. Now, this is how you know passing it down orally is not good. So Kofi Nkwama was not the judge. There was another guy who was then a friend of Kofi Nkwama. Because by then, you couldn't see KGA, right? It was bigger than the stars. It was bigger than the moon. So you couldn't set eyes on him. But a friend of his recommended me to him. And then he ostensibly was to recommend me to Wilson. So I go to KGA's office 2-3 times, and I can't even look at the guy. I can't even find him. So once he comes out, and then we have a conversation, and he says, "Well, I should go and see Wilson." It looked like at the time they had finished recruiting. So here was I, stuck in this fantasy world, of coming to work for Skyy, but apparently without a contact. So one day, I just said, "Well, let's go and see them." So I went there and told them, "Kofi Nkwama has asked me to come see you for an interview." And the guy proceeds to ask, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "Okay, well, my name is Kojo Frempong. I did this work and did that, and I went to school in Achimota, and I went to school in St. John's." And the guy says, "Okay, we finished hiring, but tell me, what's the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast?" This was literally the question that got me hired. What's the difference between East Coast rap and West Coast rap? Now, to someone listening today, it might not seem like a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. But back in 1997, Tupac had been murdered, Biggie Smalls had been murdered, the whole world was on high between East Coast gangster rap and West Coast laid back gangster rap. And so I proceeded to tell him what the difference was, and even use some of the actors like Tupac, like Biggie Smalls, like Snoop Dogg, like Dr. Dre.
Mm-hmm.
After I'd explained it, Wilson told me, "But you came late. We have finished hiring. But you go home, we'll get back to you." So I go home, and then after a week, I get a call, and it's literally to say, "Well, we've got somebody from Accra who has about 10 years experience on the radio, but we've had to let him go so we can accommodate you." I was like, wow. So, and I remember maybe about 15 years later, the guy met me in Accra at a function and said, "Do you know that I was booted out of Skyy because of you?" And I said, "Oh, I couldn't have imagined that it was you."
And who was this person?
And we had a laugh over it. So basically, that's how I got into Skyy, right? It was at a function in the middle of nowhere in Dabwase, And that's why I appreciate small beginnings, and I never, ever, ever discount them. Because who would have thought that in Dabuase, a small town, well, a bigger village than a small town, who would have thought that there was somebody who could have seen what we're doing and even vaguely recommend us to another person who had connections at Skyy, and this would be the conduit through which we will arrive at perhaps the most innovative business idea that transformed the Western region in the last 25 years.
Now, tell me.
So simple and Katia, that's how I arrived at Skyy.
That's a wonderful story, Kojo. That's a wonderful story. So tell me, who was the guy that had 10 years experience in radio who was booted out in order for you to get a job?
I would rather not say it, but safe to say that he worked at Radio Gold before coming to Skyy, but I would rather not mention his name. I don't have his permission.
I think I know who you're talking about, and we'll keep it that way.
I know, right? It's not everything we are permitted to say.
No, especially when this is going to be heard someday. No. Absolutely. Now, tell me. I don't have his tacit permission.
Yes.
So tell me, though, you were one of the pioneers then. You were there on the 5th of October when formal transmission started. Is that right?
Yes, I was. I mean, so, and it's very important to put it in context, right? So here was I, practically 17 years and a little bit, maybe just about turning 18. And I think I was 18 then. So here was I, fresh out of school, you know, the only professional job I had done before was working at the harbor. And at the harbor, my job description was helping out cocoa carriers, right? So people would carry cocoa. If they left some of the cocoa outside of the shed, because they were contract carriers, if they left some out of the shed, it was my responsibility to carry it back into the shed. I was a casual worker. I used to sweep the cocoa sheds. I used to work at the harbor anytime there was an opportunity. There'll be days I would go for a whole week without sleep because I was working day and night at the harbor. So this was the only experience I had. In spite of the fact that, well, I'd completed Achimota School, which in Ghana has its own trappings, but I was working at the cocoa shed. And this was my preemptive experience, right? Or premier experience. So to now come into the midst of all these incredible people who are known, like J.M. Caesar, like Kwesi Fletcher, like King B, you know, like Uncle Pierre, who had been on the radio for how many years in Takoradi. He was the king of the airwaves in Takoradi. So I got a transpositioning, right, from a nobody into being virtually with the stars, you know, into hanging out with the stars, you know. And I was gobsmacked sometimes by the appreciation of Takoradi people for the stars. And I was sometimes also intimidated, you know, by the sheer fact that you're working with people who drive the town, you know. Sometimes it was a surprise, sometimes it was intimidating. But yes, I was there when formal transmission began, and it was surreal because Skyy had this edge, had this vibe, had this feeling, had this air of being like a Joy FM. And Joy FM at the time was of the years of us. It was right up in the sky. And that is where Skyy was coming to. So, I mean, there were people like AC Jan, there were people like Michael Griffiths,
Michael
who, by the way,
Griffiths.
today owns a
Family TV.
full-fledged television channel in Ghana called
Family TV.
Family TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, a beautiful channel, you know. And Michael has always been beautiful. So here was I, little me, nobody me, suddenly riding with the stars, you know. So it was surreal, Philip. It was absolutely out of this whole surreal.
So let me share this with you, Kojo Frempong. Let me share this with you. Just based on the things you've said now, and mind you, there's not much you've said now that is very new to me. I was there with you. We were in the trenches together, which is what makes this conversation weird, right? Because we're talking about ourselves. We're sharing experiences that we were part of together. But the thing you've said, what it makes me feel is this, that it's like a form of epiphany, that it looks like real stars, real achievers, real movers, people who make the real difference, don't always recognize it themselves. Because I say this because of this. I had a very high regard for your intellect, for your energy, for your ability, for the fact that you were tireless and you did not come across at all as being intimidated in any way. And you were always a happy person. And my goodness, a horrible troublemaker too.
I think by some design, trouble is embedded in energy. I find it difficult to define it properly, but think of it as molten lava, right? There's so much consternation beneath, and when it finally erupts, it's trouble, right? So I think trouble and energy are co-joined. Right?
I agree, and I'll call
and you were trouble as well. and you were trouble as well. You were trouble as well. Think of all the people that you did stories on who didn't agree with you, you know? And you also had a lot of energy. And you were precise and you were straight to the point. And you had a lot of exposure as well. And as I said earlier, you're an unrepentant professional. Somebody who wouldn't bow because of the exigencies of the time. Somebody who would stick to it. And I'm sure your kids, if they ever listen, they'll say, oh yeah, he's talking about our father. Except if the passage of time has made you softer to consensus that perhaps you would not have given in earlier, but now you try to temper a little bit softness where maybe the little girl can get you to do things that you would normally not do, right? And as a father who has 3 girls as well, I know how these girls be. I know how they can blackmail you easily. I know how they can make you feel soft. So I'm sure over time, maybe the little girl has implanted or has impacted your approach to things. But I mean, it's interesting something you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're in the moment, you only think about how do I get the job done. When you're on the radio, you are in this box which is called a studio. And all you want to do from that box is to affect the thousands of people or the hundreds of thousands of people or the millions of people who are listening to you. Now, what do you want to do with those people? You want to influence their thinking, make them happy, make them think about things they previously not thought about, give them the news, and walk out without really hurting them, without making them even know that you were there. And that's the task of a radio presenter. So when you're in the moment, that's all you think. You want to go in, affect them, and get out. And it's never ending, because after today's news, there's a 6 a.m. bulletin in the morning. There's a 7:45 news bulletin for sport in the morning. There's an 8 o'clock news in the morning. It never stops. The expectation of delivery is in continuum. So you can't pause and say, hang on, how incredible is this job that we are doing? No, you can't. Because the job is not fully delivered. And you need to keep going at it. And you're as good as your last presentation. And that's why when you walk into the studio and you make one little mistake in pronunciation, it doesn't care if you were flawless yesterday in your delivery of the news or in the delivery of your sport news or in the delivery of your music presentation. It's totally irrelevant. What you need to do is to keep going at it. So you can't say, hang on, let's pause and chill. Let's get excited about what happened yesterday. No, you can't. So the expectation of delivery is in a continuum, and that's why really you can't say, oh, great stuff. No, you can't. And so I guess that's why we couldn't see, and you couldn't see, and Kim B couldn't see, and JM Caesar didn't see that they were transforming the economy of the place, that they were bringing in a newbie that would give people a different kind of thought about Takrady, that they were starting a revolution that would affect or span many careers because you are in the moment.
I agree. And you know what, Kojo? I'm kind of struggling to paint a really good picture to you as to what I thought about you, what I saw you to be. In fact, I feel like if we were on a racetrack, right? I was running, you were crawling, we were reaching the finishing line at the same time. So I look at you and I'm thinking, how can you be crawling and still be going at the same speed as me, right? Because one thing I remember is this. It's almost as if there wasn't a subject on earth that you didn't have an informed opinion about. I never liked sport, but you guys presented the sports so you were able to win me over, right? So I began to love sport. and those were the days we didn't have anything close to internet until much later, but you had statistics and facts and figures about just about any player, you know, and you delivered with passion, with energy, and it's constant. And my goodness, I hated rap music in every way, shape, or form. But when you were playing, the way you will introduce the person who is a singer, it's as if you were paying a tribute to that artist, you know, in a way that makes me feel like, I've got to listen. This means something. Yeah, just because I didn't like the music it's not a full story. Here is someone presenting the musician and the person's work in a way that is far, far more exalted than I've ever seen. You know, so and in your conversations, and then at the same time, you were just silly and crazy and troublesome and like someone who's never created anything good in his life. And I have to add that I spoke to Eloy on Monday. We went on for about an hour, and we kind of came to conclusion that it seems as if Wilson went around Ghana and selected people who were a mixture of intelligence and craziness and brought them to Skyy, you know? Because nobody there was correct, if I can put it that way, you know. And yet, the output, the delivery in the studio, I mean, you would just love it. I should say sometimes, right? I mean, we all listen to each other on radio, right? And then you listen to your colleague and you think, is that Kojo Frempong? Shakes. Like, I mean, that program was great. That delivery was good. And yet, you eat lunch with them and then you go like, he's ordinary anyway. You know, so,
I mean, you're too kind. I mean, I've never heard this crawling and running analogy before, so it must be specifically to you. It must be the idiosyncrasies of Phillip Nyakpo that can create this. I've never heard this anywhere before, but I think you're too kind. You know, so you mentioned Wilson, and it's important that we put Wilson in a very good context. We put Wilson in a proper perspective. So this guy practically rented a transmitter. He rented a transmitter from Vibe FM, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 1996. By 2001, he was now giving out a transmitter for free also. He was rather selling of his transmitters to Vibe FM, right? Wilson Arthur is the guy who brought mini disc machines to radio, to journalism for the first time in Ghana, right? When I crossed over to Joy FM in 2001, and I think Atu joined me later. Atu had just gone to Joy FM before I came. There was Joy got some mini disc at the time. And the big journalists in the newsroom were like, that mini disc is mine, this mini, and we're like, mini disc? We're using it in 97.
It's a commonplace. It's commonplace.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It's too far gone. You know, and Wilson Arthur was the guy who could play adverts from a mini disc. You know, it's important to put the guy in the right perspective. He made the impossible things look regular. He made business thinking look like a walk in the park. He made radio feel conversational. Wilson will walk into the room and say, why are you shouting out your mom or your dad? Remember that this broadcast from here is reaching 1 million people or so. The moment you bring in your mom and your dad, the broadcast is to the exclusion of everybody else except the two people you're mentioning their names.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes like it's your family affair. So, hang on, no shout outs to family members. And then we come to Accra and we hear all this about, this goes out to my mom, this goes out to my dad. I was like, can you imagine? Who is the standard bearer here? Is it the guy in Takrady who's built from ground zero up into the air in the space of 2, 3, 4 years? Or is these guys who've been postulating if they're the kings of radio, gods of radio, yet when you listen to them, it's all ordinary stuff? That's Wilson Arthur. He had a different mindset about what radio could do. And I would not trade my beginnings in radio for any other teacher, not even the BBC. I would not trade it for any other teacher. The leadership that Wilson Arthur afforded us in terms of how you did radio was par excellence. And listen to radio in many places, and it keeps going back to the tenets and the foundational principles that Wilson Arthur taught, and they remain sacrosanct till today. And that's the other thing that Wilson represents. Just simply get it done, and have no inhibitions. If you had fears, when Wilson was leading us at the time, if he had fears, we wouldn't know.
No.
Because it was as if everything was possible. My favorite period was when we were broke in the radio station.
Yes.
Every time we didn't have money for something or he needed money for something, he would say, you know what, guys, pick a phone and let's go to town. So we'll go to town and walk into these shops and make calls from the shops onto the radio and tell them how the shops were booming or what the shops had on offer. And by the time we came back, we always had money in our pocket because the radio, the shop owners could feel that, yeah, we're doing the work, and people were calling them all the time. Hey, I've heard you on the radio. Your shop is on the radio. And that was a money spinning machine. So if Wilson had fears, I could not tell. This guy was just amazing at getting it done. And that's why I think the success of Skyy Power FM, I mean, he has criticisms, right? He was always the best guy in the room. He was always the guy who related with people nicely, right?
Yeah.
He was always that guy, right? And he knew he had a bunch of young guys who, so sometimes he could pay you over the counter. But all of that was in the construct of that time. He was building a new business. So, yeah, but he never passed on his fears to us. And that allowed us to be liberated. That allowed us to feel like the territory was there to take. And on any day, I would doff my hat for Wilson Atala.
You know, that's a very beautiful tribute to Wilson. And I think anyone who's ever worked with Wilson, for Wilson, would have to acknowledge that the guy is a form of genius. And the thing is, we don't always recognize genius when we are in the company of someone with those qualities. It's only much later you look back and then you connect the dots. You know, I spoke to a gentleman called Jonathan Sowa, whom I knew when I was much, much younger because he was a family friend. But I never knew he would walk back into my life after he'd known Wilson. The two of them worked together at Media Number One. And he had high praise for Wilson, which I agree with. Business-wise, the guy is really smart. He's very adaptive. And he is creative, you know, incredibly. And one of the ways I pay tribute to him is the fact that, and many of our colleagues have said exactly the same, the guy almost never came across as a boss. He was one of us. I should share a story with you that illustrates it better than anything from Mamisi McHanson. So she says when she came to the station to bring her application, wanting to work there, you know, through the period of the test transmission, she saw two gentlemen. One was beautifully dressed, the other nothing, wretched, and lying down on the carpet. Well, turns out the beautifully dressed guy was Kimbi, and I thought, Kimbi, even when he's going to sleep, he dresses beautifully. And she says to me, do you know who the other person was? And I said, no. She says, it's Will Snather. Just looking wretched, sleeping on the carpet. But that's where the idea from the station came from. He was just one of us. He was hands-on, and he knew. Look, much later on, he told me he knew he was dealing with people who were highly talented, highly intelligent. So there was no point for him to kind of play the role of a boss. He was perfectly just one of us, you know. And we at some point as well, we didn't even feel we had management in place, even though we obviously had. You know, things were so informal, but it worked like a clock so beautifully. And like I said about the output, it was just amazing. And again, like you said before, we were all in the moment and didn't know what a revolutionary period we found ourselves in. And what amazing work we were all putting out every single day.
And you know, Wilson had help. To be honest, I think Wilson had help, and we should acknowledge that he had help. You know, in leadership theory today, we talk about thinking weekends and thinking seriously about how you lead. And you realize that Wilson spent a lot of time thinking about how he led us. But there was also Adramofa, his wife. And then there was Big Bro,
the big
who was
brother,
into
Kennedy
corporate
Arthur.
issues, right?
Yeah.
So every time Wilson thought, and I think today I can say safely that maybe Wilson was more unbridled in his thoughts processes. Big Bro and Adjoa served as checks on him, at the same time helping to refine the thinking even better, right? So in that, I'm thinking wild. Adjoa thinking, no, hold on, how do we find the money? And then his brother thinking, no, this is not the way you do it, you get into problems. They created a beautiful nexus which was an ideas playground for everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. And then also, there was King B. I mean, King B is the most well put together human being I've ever dealt with.
A gentleman.
He is like a chest. He's like a chest of drawers, right?
Yeah.
Everything opens perfectly, and everything is neatly tucked in.
And it starts with the way he dresses. You know?
King B is perhaps. I mean, what can you say about the guy? Even what he says is measured. And he always told me, don't talk too much. Speak up to this level and stop. Otherwise, you'll be blown away or you'll be taken away and then you start speaking rubbish. So this was good education, right? And then think about JMCs, all right? Mm-hmm. This guy is an accountant by profession. So he's a bean counter, right? So he's a funky bean counter. That's the kind of person you're dealing with now. You're dealing with a funky bean counter who was really, really in his funkiness. And they knew how to relate to people. They knew how to relate to people. So here was Wilson sitting at the apex, building a business. And then when his charges went out, they behaved so well, it brought more credit even to the outfit, you know? And here was Opia Mensah, who had done the job in Takoradi for so
decades.
Long. So you could tell that Wilson had assembled quite an army, but it wasn't just the army. It was the many colonels in the army and what they were doing with the general and how they were finding credit and finding friends for the general. And I think this is how Skyy blazed so quickly. I mean, I tell you a story which is really funny.
Yeah.
2 days ago, I was talking to the Attorney General now. Mm-hmm. Godfrey Dami, your brother, we're from the same place. We've known each other for 21 years. And then he related to me a story that he was in Commander in the 1997-98. We had finished A-levels. And then there was this guy who was also always on the radio, that the only radio they would listen to in Commander was Skyy Power FM. This was the only radio they would listen to. And then this guy would come on, shakes, Kojo Frempong shakes. And they were like, who is this Tuno guy? Little did they know that we're going to meet in the university. And then even then we're not friends. Little did he know that I was going to try and sell him a property, which I did. And then little did he know that we're going to connect and know that actually our mothers sat in the same classroom from class 1.
Oh, no.
This is how things come together.
Wow.
But what was really interesting was the connection to Skyy FM and how in Commander, the only radio they would listen to was Skyy Power FM. You know, and even to date, when I go around and people say, Kojo Frempong, you used to work at Skyy Power FM. I said, yes. And it's always with a tinge of pride. Yeah. Because that period of our lives was not wasted, for the want of a better expression, right? It was a period that was properly consolidated. It was a period that was associated with proper delivery, proper execution. So it's going back in time fills me with so much pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to have worked with all of you and to have worked in that great entity.
And Kojo, as I keep speaking to, our colleagues, one of the main themes coming out constantly is just the family atmosphere that existed at Skyy, where we were all friends, we were all family. And Rutai put it the best way. He said, as far as he was concerned, everyone who worked at Skyy was his sibling, that we were all siblings. And I felt goosebumps on my skin. I thought, wow, what a beautiful way to express it, because in a way, that is how I think we all feel. And the feeling is such that you share it only when you only if you participated in it, and as much as we were all part of it, we didn't get the full picture of how valuable and special it was until we had all left. Then you look back and you think, that was something. That was something.
We ate Kenke together. We ate, everybody, we all ate together, right? And this was Google or Alphabet before the theories of leadership at Alphabet and Google came to light, right? Mm-hmm. We're putting teams that were brilliant, and like you say, we're family, and Rutai puts it best. But what really strikes me now, looking back, was how much goodwill we had for each other. That every time somebody else was on the radio, you willed the person to do great,
succeed,
and that you took pleasure in actually listening to the person. So if there was a story by Phillip Nyakpo, you took pleasure in listening to the story because, it was beating the opposition to it. It was creating a new verb, and you really wanted him to do better, right? And and you are jamming in your car, or you're jamming in a car, you're jamming in a church, and you want to listen to what people are saying in the Truskies. You want to listen to what people are saying in the taxis. You wanted people to do well. It's not something that you always find in radio stations or in television outlets, because just the mere fact of media representation or being a media person breeds a certain kind of ego. So you have companies that are split down the line on egotistic terms, right? But when people eat together, people go home together, they sit in the same cars, they develop this camaraderie that binds them together. And that kind of comradeship is what existed at Skyy. So the bus will come and pick everybody, and when the bus doesn't come on time, everybody is angry with the driver, And so this was the kind of comradeship that existed. And just because I knew when you woke up, and you woke up at 3 a.m., we're all bonded by that hustle, and that's where the family should take. And to date, we've kept these friendships for how long? But we know that if anything happened to one of us,
it happens to all of us.
To everybody.
Rutai again says that about every few months, one of these old friends from Skyy would always call him just to check on him for no reason at all, and I thought, just how sweet. Sure, you and I, for example, haven't talked for a long time, but it seems not to have changed anything. In fact, I spoke to Kwesi Fletcher along these same lines, and he was reminding me that in the early days of, what we will hardly describe as internet, it was you and I who used to go and fetch information from the on the internet using the old dial-up thing. We bring information, doing the research, and there was a segment on the Jolly Breakfast Show called "Let's Talk About This."
The Jolly Breakfast Show.
And it was only when he said that I remembered. I thought, Shakes and I knew how to use the internet then, because there was actually
we used to go to
that internet cafe.
GT.
Yes.
No, the Ghana Telecom place.
Yes.
And then after put it on a floppy disk and run back. I'm not sure even at the time you could connect emails that much.
No, back. It took about half an hour to download one message, or
to download it.
And those days there was only Yahoo
and then
search,
there'll be times,
no Google.
And then there'll be times that by the time you got to the station, the floppy disk was corrupted.
Yes.
or before you saved on the floppy disk, there was this knob that you needed to almost like turn on or allow, right?
Yes.
And sometimes in the heat of the moment, you forget that.
And it doesn't write
and then you go and you realize, holy smokes, it didn't, it didn't write. Yeah. But it builds capacity, right?
It builds
capacity of speed.
Yeah.
It builds capacity of trying to get the information, even what would sell, what people wanted, So yeah, I guess we can't cry over it too much,
And
so it was very interesting.
Mostly we called you Shakes, which I believe is a name you had before joining Skyy. Tell me how you got that name, Shakes, which is short form of Shakespeare, William Shakespeare.
I didn't think this was going to come up, but that's deep into when I was in secondary school. I developed a liking for Shakespeare early. I don't know if it's a genetic malfunction, right? But my kids also seem to have a similar appreciation. So yeah. So words are important because they are the vessels of conversation, and so yeah, I liked words early. Think of me as a science student who was deeply given to literature as well. So, yeah. So in one of I think when I was in Form 3 or Form 4, I was in the debating club. I was head of the debating club as a principal debater for St. John's. And then one fine day, there was something that I read in class and everybody said, "What? Shakespeare, who shakes?" So I think the name started with Shakes.
Yeah.
And then it mutated to Shakes. And then now, after 30 years or so, some people call me Shaker, which I really don't, it's like Chinese whispers, right? It started from Shakes, and now it's Shaker. So yeah, so that's principally how the name came about.
The name eventually was recognized for what it was worth, which is you were good with words, you cared about your diction, you spoke with authority, and when you speak, you felt responsible for what you spoke. You felt responsible for your words, and it was clear. And again, it goes back to what we were saying, that people who are very effective sometimes don't know it themselves, because it showed, in the way you spoke, in every way. And I have this feeling that giving your own the way you describe the fact that you felt you were inadequate, I have the feeling that because you have the capacity to learn quickly, when you joined Skyy and were part of Skyy, you just fit in and learn so quickly. Everyone, at least the listeners, would have thought you already knew what you were doing rather than learning on a job.
Again, I think you're too kind, and I'm sure you're trying to make me feel comfortable about this interview. But yes, I think if the opportunity presents itself for you not to be misunderstood, take it. Say it in a way that people can appreciate exactly what you're talking about. I find that the connection between mind and tongue should be straight, unlevered, direct. And it should carry exactly what you're saying. I don't want to say things that I would probably leave and say, "Oh, but I could have said it this way." So I try to say what I actually feel in a way that people can relate to and understand and be comfortable with. It's the same with politics. Now we're trying to venture into politics. In fact, we have ventured into politics. And it's always about how do we learn more? How do we get more in terms of knowledge so we can appeal to people of different knowledge strata so that all of these people can come in? I remember in radio we used to say there are probably three categories of people listening to you. People who know below what you know. So when you're communicating on the radio, you want to explain to the people who know below what you know. There are people who know just like you know. They're on the same wavelength with you. How do you communicate so those people appreciate you? And then there's this top of the pyramid people who know above you, who know more about the story than you do, who are more in tune with the conversation than you. How do you pose it so that they also appreciate you? So you need to know along these three how to communicate.
And serve everyone.
And serve everybody, you know. And therefore, it is of prime import to me on every single day to advance knowledge, or the acquisition of knowledge, or the potential for acquisition of knowledge. I am a committed, lifelong learner. Because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Can you just give me your history with Takoradi? This is just to contextualize things. Were you born in Takoradi? Did you grow up in Takoradi before Skyy?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Of course, I was born, baptized, bred in Takoradi. If it wasn't for Wenchi now, I would even be buried in Takoradi. And you know, Takoradi is this potpourri of cultures, right? I don't know whether because it was the sea. I don't know whether because the people who built the harbor came from Sekendi and they brought their talents from elsewhere, you know. But it's this, Takoradi is this place like no other, you know, in Ghana. And people say New York is like that. I say New York is not like that. You know, New York is more given to style. We're given to the hustle. Pure hustle,
and we acknowledge
pure, genuine
it.
Hustle.
And we acknowledge
and
it.
We acknowledge it.
Yeah.
You know? Nobody in New York is getting on a ship to go to Europe. No. You know, the hustle is real. You know,
and having lived in Takoradi myself, one of the things I came to love about Takoradi is there was a certain level of a sense that it was egalitarian, you know, because you could be walking on the street in a Manful and you meet Papa Yankson. You know, you go to Anaji or wherever, and CK man is standing by the roadside trying to buy wache. You know, and no one thinks anyone is bigger than anybody.
And nobody thought it was out of place. Back then there were no egos.
Mm-hmm.
We're all the same. You know, that's why you say it's egalitarian. We had our own music. We had our own Creole. We spoke our own language. It wasn't fancy like the Cape process used to speak it, you know. And when we said Ase, everybody knew you were from downtown.
And when you say
Tadi,
Bele, only Tadi is identified with
only Tadi, you know. and that's why. So I kept telling people when Kofi Kinata was coming up that, you know, because you don't speak the language, there's a certain appreciation of the song that you cannot have. Because if you understood the language, you guys would be you'll be going crazy in your head. I spent the first 16 years of my life in Takoradi, and I never traded for anywhere in the world, not even Australia, Perth, not Canada, nowhere in the world. You know, Tadi is Tadi for me, is home for me. And the good thing about Takoradi was this. It was virtually no man's land. So think of it this way. My father and my mother came from Winchi and settled in Takoradi.
Yep.
Our next door neighbor was a Ga. Then 2 houses away was an Ashanti. And all of them had come to coagulate in Takoradi. They had come to be together in Takoradi. So everybody left a little bit of their tribal narratives at home and tried to forge a community. And it was the same way when you went to a mouthful, the Evers who had come. I say to people, if you're an Ever and you're born in Takrady, you're very different from an Ever who is born in Anyako and grew up in Anyako. If you're an Ashanti and you're born in Takrady, you're very different from an Ashanti who was born in Kumasi. If you're a Bonoman and you're born in Takrady, it's very, very different. And then the thing about Takrady was, everybody felt they needed a credible amount of hustle capital to succeed. At the same time, we felt nothing could hold us back. We felt there were real possibilities, even if the opportunities were few. We felt it. And we supported Hazak as a wife. and we got fish if we wanted, fresh from the sea. I mean, this was beautiful. And we went to the same schools. So by the time you get into, say, St. John's School, you realize your mates came from Complex, some came from Chapel Hill, there's about 6 schools, and we all went to those schools. If you went to Fijai, we all went to those schools. Services, so
it was a one true community. It was a one true community.
It was a one true community, a one street community. No matter how big it was. So we used to say Takrady is a very small place. Everybody knows everybody, which was true, and that brought some familiarity.
And to put Takrady into context, and Skyy as well, and just how far we've come, and I was speaking to Kojo Nyakpo, and somehow we ended up talking about Kofi Kinata, who is a new representative of Takrady, a genuine representative. It's like he's inherited a CK man,
authentic.
He's authentic.
He's authentic.
And so apparently he knows him very well. He said he's actually under 30 years old at the moment. He's not yet 30. And then somehow both of us started saying, hey, so if we're saying Skyy is 24, 25 years old, who was Kinata when we started Skyy? He was like a baby. And then that's when you realize, boy, we've come a long way in terms of the period. I mean, 25 years, 25 years is a pretty long time.
Yeah, but what's interesting, and it's interesting you brought this up. So if you ask Kofi Kinata about the musicology that influenced him, he would say, when I was younger, I was listening to Skyy. And the music Skyy played influenced me. So that's the measure of a radio station, that you can't actually tell of its legacy. So we are direct beneficiaries of Skyy because we worked there, and then our career span. But what about people who went into music? What about people that Skyy revolutionized their businesses? What about the people that Skyy, through listening to Skyy, they had ideas? You can't really tell the legacy of the radio station. You can't tell the legacy of Skyy because it was in every home and it affected people differently. And I think that's where Kofi Kinata comes in. Because I remember him saying, when he was growing up, so he was 5 when Skyy was set up, but all the time he was growing up, he practically listened to Skyy.
Everything was about
Skyy. So Skyy became his window of opportunity to peek into the outside world, to peek into music, Because here's the thing, you may have Papa Yanks, you may have CK Man, you may have A.B. Crento, who was going to play the music for you all the time? Newman, who was going to play the music for you all the time? Just even stay in tune. I think the legacy of Skyy cannot be cocooned into small spaces, into saying, oh, that's the legacy. I think it goes far beyond what we can ever anticipate.
Do you know, it's funny, Kojo, that was going to be my last question. What would you say the legacy of Skyy is? And that's the question I'm asking everyone. But you've preempted it as beautiful as only you could. But so having said that, let me say my 10-year-old boy loves Kofi Kinata's music, obviously, because I introduced him to it. And then he decided to read about him and realize he's from Takrady. And he almost embarrassed me when he said, well, if he's from Takoradi, then he should know me. And then I thought, oh no, I missed that boat. And I had to think of a way to communicate to him that I am too old for Kofi Kinata to know me, and that I left before Kofi Kinata, started his career, his incredible career.
Yeah, I think a beautiful way to sum this up, even for your little boy. Like Shakespeare says, the world is a stage, and we all take to it and we play our part, and sometimes it's time to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Skyy did for Takoradi was to shatter what today is called a glass ceiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Skyy just said to everybody, it is possible in Takoradi. Remember that radio had taken off in Accra and Kumasi, and people didn't think there was enough economic activity to drive radio in Takoradi and in the Western region.
Mm-hmm.
What Skyy did was to say, look at us now. We took the option of coming to no man's land. We took the option of coming to the place which was forgotten, and look at us now. So Skyy just shot through the roof, went way up, and made everybody see that there was potential. So immediately after Skyy, how many radio stations have since come to Takoradi?
Too many. As of today, March 2021, I understand there's at least 30 different radio stations.
Exactly. And so the true import of Skyy was to show that we could go from Takoradi to match anybody in Ghana. And by Jove, we did.
And exactly on that score, may I also say that Wilson deserves a lot of credit. But he also pushed into an industry that was truly unusual. Radio is one industry that, sure, you may own it, but it appears the true owners, the true stakeholders are the listeners, who to them, as far as they are concerned, is their radio station. And when I worked there, I came to appreciate the kind of industry it was, because I have loved radio since I was very young. By the age of 7 or 8, my grandfather was getting me to tune his radio to BBC at dawn at 5 a.m. That's how I learned to love radio. But those days, I didn't see radio as something that people worked at. I didn't realize it was the result of people's actions. I thought it was just automatic. I didn't realize that the person who was making it happen could have a headache on that day, or had some uniquely human challenges they had to overcome to make it happen. So Wilson created the radio station in his image, but in the end, it wasn't truly his property. It was owned by the people who gave their incredibly high approval for so long. So much so that we are having this conversation in order to try to tell the story in a document on the day the station turns 25. And
indeed, the most successful brands in the world are the ones owned by the people, right? So, but having said that, to close it off, Philip.
Yeah.
The true measure of quality is if the people in the radio station, or if the people in an entity, can cross into quasi comparables or competitors, right? So think of it this way. I walked into Joy FM. Ato walked into Joy FM. Joe Innocent walked into Joy FM. Parkofi, I think, walked into Adam FM. And we didn't come there as people who were coming to learn. We came as people who were accomplished and we could be plugged in. So think of it like somebody moving from Leicester City and going to Real Madrid and starting.
Yeah.
And so you could tell that the quality was not let's say, to be modest, let's say there was similar quality, right?
Correct.
For the people who were on the radio at Skyy, who were then plugged into Joy or into multimedia, I went straight onto television, so if you look at it in that context, you realize that, and Macansen, Mami photographed, Edu, all these people, they were.
Erika
Sylvia, who is now at BOA,
Mama V,
Erika Yanyong,
I took up that.
I took Dadzi, all these people came from Skyy. We may be the single radio station which has produced top level radio presenters in Accra.
Oh, and there's Kwame Jokoto,
Kwame Jokoto, there's a lawyer Monday.
A lawyer Monday,
Yeah, there was a lawyer Monday. And when I was about leaving Joy, I remember Kwesi Chum asking me, bring me one person who can do the job like you. I called a lawyer, where are you there? I'm going to Accra. I said, no, come to Accra.
Come to Joy.
Come to Accra. And then when I was leaving television, they said, I said, look, a lawyer Monday, come. So I thank you for this conversation, Phillip.
Kojo Frempong,
I really thank you.
I thank you very much. Seriously.
It's made me appreciate the last 25 years, through a different filter. And I'm really grateful.
And what I'm telling all my colleagues, which I'll say to you, is that I am not promising that I'll write a book because it scares me. However, I do not want to not try. I have to try, as a way to pay tribute to all of us together at the same time, So if it ever worked, it is because you helped, and I am grateful for it.
Phillip, one day we shall be talking about you to your daughter and your son, right in your presence as though you didn't exist. Bless you for this conversation. And thank you for the incredible job you're doing and what you're going to be doing for Skyy by writing this book. I know you will. Just do it. Let the spirit of Skyy take over.
Thank you, Shakes. And I can't wait to talk to you properly like the friends we are sometime soon in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
One day we'll talk about politics.
All right, Charlie. All right, then. Have a good day.